strong. Needless to say, Xianxia's group was at a complete disadvantage in this collision. The four-world realm. If the four-world experts from before were compared to these three experts and that desolate beast, it was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. After all, the four-world realm experts from before hadn't been able to endure Xianxia's attack, which carried 5 swings of his sword with the sword domain. However, Xianxia's opponent hadn't just withstood that attack. He'd even injured Xianxia in the process. A four-world realm expert who'd truly attained this realm of cultivation without any help. Xianxia suddenly grinned, and then he walked toward the man with a saber. An expert. Xianxia was looking for such an expert to fight with. Only then could he truly be pressured, and only with pressure could he unleash his strength. That was the only way for him to discover his own flaws and the advantages that his opponent possessed. Fight. He'd always yearned to fight to his heart's content. He could naturally do that with a Nanjing too, but he had to stop when appropriate with her. After all, it was impossible for them to fight to the death. But this expert was different. He could decide on the victor and the person who lives when fighting this expert. The death guard with the saber gazed at Xianxia with indifference on his face. But an ethereal saber had appeared in his grasp. At most times, a battle between experts depended on their mental states. Or to be more direct, their mentality. If their mental states collapsed, their auras would naturally weaken. As he walked toward the death guard, there was an indescribable aura of confidence coming from Xianxia. However, the death guard was extremely calm and wasn't affected by Xianxia's aura at all. An expert? The death guards of the desolate race had seen all sorts of experts. Xianxia may be strong, but he was quite inferior when compared to the desolate emperor and some of the experts from Eternal Kingdom. So, it was clearly impossible for Xianxia to suppress him with just aura alone. Executor suddenly vanished from Xianxia's grasp, and it was replaced by the sword precursor. His goal wasn't to kill but to fight. Aling and Huangying watched as Xianxia suddenly transformed into a ray of light that vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, the Death Guard's saber moved. It chopped down. The saber energy was ghastly, powerful, and fast. The sword and saber collided. Bang! Space shook violently, and then the space in a huge area cracked open like a spiderweb. But it didn't take long for the space here to return to normal. At the same time, an invisible wave of energy appeared throughout the area. Along with the arrival of this energy, the space throughout the area grew even stronger. Huangying looked up at the sky. Someone is strengthening the space here. Aling replied indifferently. The higher-ups of the desolate race are watching? Huangying nodded. Aling closed her eyes slowly. When I was in Eternal Kingdom, my clan had records on the desolate Death Guard. According to those records, all of them have experienced numerous battles, and they would rather die in battle than surrender. They instilled horror in countless experts throughout Eternal Kingdom when you attacked all those years ago. So, let me see if they really are as those records say. Aling's figure gradually turned ethereal. A moment later, she vanished on the spot, and when she appeared again, she was above the Death Guard with blood-red gloves. Her palm descended. It seemed to carry the strength of the world, and it was simply intimidating. The Death Guard suddenly looked up and slammed his fist upward. There was a blood-red glow around his fist. As soon as they collided, the world shook violently. However, Aling had vanished on the spot, and then a palm slapped down at the Death Guard's face. Just like that, in just a short breath of time, Aling and the Death Guard had collided at least 1,000 times. Even though the Death Guard was being pushed back repeatedly, he'd withstood every one of Aling's attacks. However, not only did Aling's aura avoid weakening, it was even growing stronger. She was being serious. Huangying looked at his own opponent and said, "Come, let's have a proper fight." His figure transformed into a ray of light that shot at the young man. Meanwhile, Xianxia and the Death Guard were locked in battle again. The most intense battle here was between Xianxia and the Death Guard with the saber. They had completely disregarded their lives, and every collision between them left a blood-red injury on them. Just like that, it only took a short while for both of them to be covered in injuries. Every attack drew blood, In the primordial pagoda, Snowy was looking up at the sky from the ascension platform, and Oxy, Arya, and Sword Scroll were with her. Anxiety filled Snowy's eyes, and Nanjing was standing nearby with indifference on her face. A short while passed before Snowy glanced at a Nanjing and flew over to her. Snowy pointed up. She was asking a Nanjing if she could lead Oxy and the others to help Yang Yi. In the beginning, she'd already planned to lead the demon beasts to help Yang Yi, but a Nanjing had stopped her. A Nanjing glanced at Snowy and said, "Just watch." Snowy was a little hesitant. Meanwhile, a Nanjing suddenly walked toward Snowy, and the latter hurriedly flew over to Arya's shoulder and sat down obediently. Sword Scroll was quite amused by this scene, because even someone as lawless as Snowy had someone she feared. Sword Scroll naturally understood what a Nanjing sought to do. Yang Yi was improving his strength through battle. If they helped him, it wouldn't be difficult to kill the Death Guard, but Yang Yi would never get to improve himself. Moreover, if that continued, Yang Yi's strength would start to stagnate. Yang Yi had to fight normal battles himself, and it was something he wanted too. Sword Scroll walked over to a Nanjing and looked up at the sky. "That Death Guard is very strong." And Nanjing replied indifferently, "He's not bad, not bad." Sword Scroll laughed bitterly. "And Nanjing, they aren't just not bad. These Death Guards of the Desolate Rate instilled terror in countless experts of Eternal Kingdom all those years ago. During that battle, their army was unstoppable upon entering Eternal Kingdom, and they almost killed their way to the capital. They have truly experienced countless battles." She gazed at a Nanjing. "Of course, they wouldn't be able to gain an advantage over someone like you, the martial god physique." Her physique was no joke. Ordinary people couldn't compete with her in battle at all. Even Yang Yi was inferior to her. Actually, Sword Scroll was very curious. Who would win if Yang Yi and a Nanjing fought to the death? Outside the primordial pagoda, the battle was still going on. The force of their battles caused the space here to tremble. But no matter how they fought, the space here didn't shatter again, and it didn't even crack open. The space here was strong enough to endure the strength of 5 world realm experts now. Bang! Suddenly, an explosion resounded, and then Yang Yi and the Death Guard split apart. They flew over 1 kilometer away respectively and slammed into the ground, and then they rolled another 300 m away after that. Everywhere they passed, the ground was dyed blood red. It was blood, but it didn't take long for them to stand up again. But their hands were trembling. They gazed at each other from afar, and then they vanished on the spot. Bang! Space shook violently. They were blasted away again. However, right at the instant Yang Yi's figure was blasted away, the Death Guard suddenly stabbed his saber into the space in front of him. Hiss! The ethereal saber stabbed into space, and the Death Guard used the fortified space to stop himself. A moment later, he hurled his saber at Yang Yi with both hands. Huss! It shot through the air, causing ripples to arise in space. A vicious glow flashed through Yang Yi's eyes while his figure flew backward. At this moment, his figure suddenly turned ethereal. The sword domain. Once the sword domain was activated, the saber immediately started slowing down before him, but the energy it contained was extremely powerful and showed signs of breaking through Yang Yi's domain. Yang Yi grabbed his sword with both hands and stabbed it forward. Hiss! Space rippled in its wake. Bang! As soon as they collided, space started rippling like an earthquake was running through it. The ethereal saber shook violently and vanished. Meanwhile, Yang Yi's sword left his grasp and flashed forward as it stabbed at the Death Guard. The Death Guard gazed at the sword with coldness and indifference in his eyes. When the sword arrived just around 10 m away from him, he suddenly used his hand like a saber and chopped down at the sword. Saber energy surged. Bang! 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 Explosions resounded in the sky. A few breaths of time later, a figure was blasted out of the sky. It was the Death Guard with the saber. He slammed against the ground over 3 kilometers away, but it only took a moment for him to stand up again. As soon as he stood up, his face wasn't calm anymore, and it was replaced with a ferocious and vicious expression. The Death Guard clenched his fists, and the veins beneath his skin were trembling. The Death Guard's aura gradually grew stronger and stronger, and in just a short few breaths of time, his aura had multiplied by many times. It's a secret bloodline technique. Suddenly, Huang Ying's voice resounded in Yang Ye's mind. Be careful, Brother Yang. It's a secret bloodline technique that allows them to forcefully improve their strength. You... He hadn't even finished speaking when the Death Guard vanished on the spot, and then a 300m long ray of saber energy flashed. It was beyond fast. Yang Ye's pupils constricted, and he instinctively raised his sword to stop it. Boom! The saber energy blasted Yang Yi over 10 kilometers away. Yang Ye's figure slammed into the ground while blood sprayed from his mouth. Besides that, his entire body had cracked open while blood sprayed from those cracks. The Death Guard glanced coldly at Yang Yi. Weak! Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly looked up, and then a powerful wave of intent surged out from him. Madness intent. The Mad Demon Bloodline. The Mad Demon Bloodline. At this point in their battle, both sides had their rage blazing to the max. Both Yang Yi and the Death Guard stopped holding back. Once Yang Ye's madness intent arose, he suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang! An instant later, a ray of blood-red sword energy flashed, and then the Death Guard was blasted over 30 kilometers away. The Dead Guard slammed against the ground, and his body immediately cracked open. Countless strands of blood sprayed from his body. The Death Guard looked up at Yang Yi, who'd entered into an insane state, and there was a vicious and ferocious glow in his eyes. The Death Guard ignored his heavy injuries and stomped his right foot down, transforming into a ray of saber energy that shot at Yang Yi. Bang! As soon as he arrived before Yang Yi, his figure was blasted away once more. This time, his body exploded apart and only his soul remained. However, the Death Guard didn't flee like the experts he'd faced in the past. The Death Guard raised his hands and formed an ethereal and translucent saber. He stared at Yang Yi while an endless stream of soul energy converged into the saber. Desolate Death Guards only died in battle and did not escape it. The Death Guard's soul suddenly started burning slightly. Soul ignition. Obviously, the Death Guard planned to ignite his soul to unleash his strongest attack. Suddenly, a voice resounded, "Step down." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of white light entered the Death Guard's soul, and then the flames around his soul instantly vanished. The Death Guard didn't attack again. He just took a knee and bowed toward the sky, and then he left. However, Yang Yi was in a state of madness right now, so he didn't know how to stop. Yang Yi tapped his right foot down and soared up into the air like a rock, and the sword precursor left behind a string of blood-red afterimages as it shot through the sky like a gorgeous bloody glow. Right at the instant Yang Yi attacked, a middle-aged man in a luxurious robe appeared in front of Yang Yi. The middle-aged man gazed at Yang Yi with a spurious smile. Interesting. Yang Yi didn't care who it was and just swung his sword. Hiss! It sliced open the fortified space here. Once he entered into a state of madness, Yang Ye's overall strength had improved tremendously, especially his sword Dao. Actually, even in the mortal world, if someone went mad to do something, then it would be extremely terrifying regardless of what it was. However, this attack, which sliced through space with ease, had been stopped by a pair of fingers. The middle-aged man's fingers. Yang Ye's sword shook violently, but it didn't take long to calm down. However, no matter how much force Yang Yi used, it wouldn't move at all. So, Yang Yi just released the sword and slammed a punch forward instead. It shot straight for the middle-aged man's face. The man grinned slightly. He took sword precursor in his hand and used its hilt to strike Yang Ye's fist. Bam! Yang Yi was blasted almost 30 kilometers away. Yang Yi descended to the ground but wasn't injured. Not even in the slightest. However, a huge expanse of space behind him suddenly turned pitch black. That expanse of space had been obliterated. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man shook his hand slightly, and the sword precursor descended before Yang Yi. He said, "Continue." Yang Yi raised the sword precursor again, but he didn't attack the middle-aged man. His figure shot over to the Death Guard, who was still in fierce combat against Huang Ying. Yang Yi may have gone insane, but he could still sense if he was a match for his opponent. If he wasn't a match, then flee he would. Was it embarrassing? Perhaps it was. But it was better than losing his life. The middle-aged man was quite stunned to see Yang Yi do that, and then he shook his head and smiled. That won't do. As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared before Yang Yi and tapped a finger at Yang Yi. It was a very ordinary tap. Meanwhile, Yang Ye's sword shot forward. But his sword was executor now. 5 swings with the sword domain. At the moment Yang Ye's 5th swing descended, a wisp of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. But he didn't pull his finger back. Bang! The middle-aged man took a few steps back. But Yang Yi had been blasted over 30 kilometers away. Just like before, he wasn't injured at all. The middle-aged man glanced at his finger, and there was a small speck of blood red. It had been left behind by executor. The middle-aged man chuckled. As expected of Eternal Kingdom's #1 sword, it can even pierce through my defenses. Meanwhile, Yang Yi appeared in front of him, and then Yang Yi swung executor madly with both hands. The madness sword technique. Every single swing of the sword descended upon the same spot. In a breath of time, Yang Yi had swung his sword no less than 100 times. But the middle-aged man had stopped them all. Moreover, the middle-aged man had only taken a single step back. However, Yang Yi didn't stop and continued swinging his sword madly. It was like he was venting, and the middle-aged man merely defended himself without attacking. Just like that, around 2 hours passed before Yang Yi was exhausted. However, he was still swinging. During these 2 hours, he'd been swinging 100 times per breath of time, so how many times had he swung his sword in 2 hours? The middle-aged man had never fought back throughout this time and just allowed Yang Yi to attack him. An hour later, Yang Yi stopped and lied on the group while gasping for air. At this moment, the madness intent around him had vanished, and he'd returned to normal. Yang Yi closed his eyes. He was truly exhausted now. However, he'd really fought to his heart's content, he truly had, because he'd never fought like this in the past. Before this, practically all his enemies took just a single swing of the sword or 2 at most. Yet now, the middle-aged man had merely defended himself and allowed Yang Yi to unleash everything to his heart's content. It was something Yang Yi hadn't experienced in a very, very long time. Meanwhile, Aling and Huang Ying stopped. It wasn't that they wanted to stop fighting, it was because their opponents had stopped fighting. The death guards just stood silently behind the middle-aged man. Huang Ying glanced at the middle-aged man, hesitated for a moment, and asked, "Are you the Sky Lord?" The middle-aged man glanced at Huang Ying and smiled. "While you're not the best among the princes, you're not bad." Huang Ying instantly revealed a solemn expression on his face when he heard the middle-aged man admit it. The Sky Lord. He was a figure from the Desolate Emperor's time. All the death guards of the Desolate race had been taught and managed by the Sky Lord. Could be said that he was their leader. Moreover, his identity was very special too. It could be said that he only obeyed the Desolate Emperor. Even the Crown Prince had no authority to command him. Of course, while they couldn't make him do anything, they could command the Desolate Death Guards. Huang Ying laughed bitterly. "If you're going to act against us, then I can only admit defeat." Just as he'd said, if the Sky Lord and Desolate Death Guard had picked sides, and it wasn't his side, then he would have no choice but to admit defeat. Because unless the Desolate Emperor or that other existence in the Desolate race took his side, he would have no chance at winning. The Sky Lord shook his head. "I don't want to interfere in your competitions. These brothers of mine merely came here to test your strength. Simply speaking, this was a test. My Desolate race only respects the strong. But these friends of yours have entered the Desolate world without permission. Under normal circumstances, they should die. But since you brought them here, they can be allowed to enter, but the necessary tests cannot be avoided." He glanced at Aling and Yang Yi. "Welcome to the Desolate world." Aling nodded slightly and remained silent. As for Yang Yi, he was still lying there. Sky Lord glanced at Yang Yi and smiled. "Your battle with my Desolate race's Death Guard was a fair battle, and you didn't use any external sources of strength, so it can be considered as your win. But I interfered. That was unfair to you. Thus, I thought for a while and decided to compensate you, and that is why I acted as your sparring partner for so long. I presume you've gained quite a bit from that. Farewell." As he spoke, he gazed at Huang Ying. "It isn't that easy to become the crown prince. The three of you will probably find the next stage very difficult to overcome." Huang Ying laughed bitterly. "What else can I do at this point? Give up." Skylord smiled. "The crown prince isn't a form of authority. It's responsibility. The crown prince shoulders the responsibility of my desolate race's future, so normal people can't be the crown prince. Do you understand what I mean?" Huang Ying shook his head. "Not really." Skylord chuckled. "All right, that's enough. Good luck." He vanished on the spot with the other death guards. Huang Ying fell silent for a moment, and then he went to Yang Ye's side. "Brother Yang, are you all right?" Yang Yi opened his eyes, glanced at them, and shook his head slightly. Skylord had only defended himself and had not attacked. So, besides being completely exhausted, Yang Yi hadn't been injured at all. As for the injuries he suffered from the death guard with the saber, it had been healed by his primordial violet energy a long time ago. Huang Ying nodded. "Let's rest for now." Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly and entered the primordial pagoda. Yang Yi went to the cultivation room. Absorb. He'd comprehended too much during that battle. Bloodline. He'd gained a faint understanding of what the energy of the bloodline represented. Outside the primordial pagoda, and Nanjing appeared where Yang Yi had been. She held a spear in her hand and had an indifferent expression on her face. It was quite dangerous once Yang Yi entered the primordial pagoda. If someone attacked the space he resided at, he was very likely to be caught off guard. And Nanjing had clearly come outside to protect him. Huang Ying and Aling glanced at Nanjing but didn't say anything. They were naturally aware of her. She possessed the martial god physique. It was especially so for Aling because she'd experienced Nanjing's strength for herself. Could be said that Nanjing wasn't any weaker to all three of them. Nanjing wasn't good with words, so she didn't say anything, and the surroundings fell silent. In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi sat cross-legged in the cultivation room. He was thinking about something right now. His bloodline. He hadn't sensed it when he used the madness sword technique while in that mad state, but now that he thought about it, he noticed that his blood seemed to have been undergoing some sort of change. Moreover, at the moment he was at the peak of madness while attacking, his blood had actually started to boil slightly. However, it only took a moment to calm down again. It was boiling. His blood had been boiling. That was what Yang Yi had grasped. The Yang clan had always possessed the mad demon bloodline, but it made them go mad and lose themselves. So, the members of the clan rarely utilized it. Coupled with the fact that he'd never been in the Yang clan, Yang Yi had no idea how to truly activate it and improve himself. His father, Yang Wudi, definitely knew how, but his father hadn't taught him. Moreover, his father had even modified the mad demon bloodline. Modified it. While it was said to have been modified, it was actually just suppression of the madness elements within the bloodline. So, as Yang Ye's strength increased, and after he comprehended the madness intent, he could be said to have overcome the modified bloodline his father had left him and regained the purest form of the Yang clan's mad demon bloodline. Now, he had to find out how to activate his bloodline. He hadn't truly grasped it right now, and he merely obtained a little of its power when he released the madness intent. Even then, it raised his strength tremendously. But what if he truly activated his bloodline? Yang Yi had no idea how to accomplish that, and he could only gradually explore it on his own. However, after exploring it for quite some time, Yang Yi hadn't been able to figure out anything. Meanwhile, a voice resounded, "You want to activate your bloodline?" Yang Yi looked up and saw Sword Scroll. Yang Yi nodded in response. Sword Scroll spoke softly. "I saw your last battle. I watched carefully, and I noticed that when your strength was at its peak, the blood vessels beneath your skin had started to tremble. Or I should say that your blood was boiling, but it didn't take long for it to calm down again." Yang Yi asked, "What are you trying to tell me?" She replied softly, "I mean, if you want to stimulate your bloodline, battle may be your only option. fight like a madman, and when you fight to a certain extent, or I should say that when you go mad to a certain extent, it may have a chance of being activated. Every bloodline has a different method of activation, and your mad demon bloodline may require battle. Or to be more precise, it may require madness. The more insane you get, the more unclear your mind gets, the more likely you are to activate it. Yang Yi fell silent. Madness. The more mad and unclear his mind was, the greater his chances were of activating his bloodline. He seemed to have found something. Battle. Just like the battle from before. A battle where he fought to his heart's content. Only such a battle had the greatest likelihood of activating his bloodline. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll said, "You're already showing signs of reversing your bloodline. If you're able to grasp the Mad Demon bloodline before completing that, it will be very beneficial to you. Moreover, reversing your bloodline isn't something that can be completed overnight. If you're able to grasp your Mad Demon bloodline during this period, it'll provide a huge increase in strength to you." Yang Yi nodded. It was true. If he could grasp the Mad Demon bloodline before completing the reversal of his bloodline, then it would definitely be very beneficial to him. Unfortunately, he couldn't rush the process of grasping it. Yang Yi shook his head and left the primordial pagoda. Outside the pagoda, and Nanjing glanced at him and entered the pagoda. Huang smiled. "Brother Yang, how do you feel?" Yang Yi replied, "Very good." Huang nodded and shot a glance into the distance. He said, "There's one last barrier ahead of us, and it's our final counterattack. Anyone who wants to be the next crown prince won't let us pass, and it'll be a truly difficult battle." Aling suddenly smiled. "Are you afraid?" Huang shook his head. "I'm trying to tell you that no matter what happens, I'm happy to have left the desolate world this time, because this trip allowed me to get to know both of you. Perhaps both of you are unaware of it, but to the geniuses of my desolate race, we only have ourselves. As far as we were concerned, the outside world is just a low-level world, and the geniuses there are trash. We even hold disdain for eternal kingdom." He laughed bitterly at this point. "But after I met both of you, I realized how ignorant and laughable such thoughts were. One can never be conceited and overconfident." Yang Yi and Aling remained silent. Actually, they had similar thoughts too. Before this, Yang Yi felt that Nanjing was the only person in the younger generation who could compete with him. However, these princes of the desolate race weren't any weaker than him. Then there was Aling, this woman from Eternal Kingdom. Her strength was terrifyingly strong too. As they always say, it was best to keep a low profile and work towards one's goals. No matter the time, it was always good to stay humble and maintain a low profile. They exchanged glances, smiled, and continued forward. They passed through the last mountain of the mountain range, and a boundless plain stood before them. They could faintly see some grand floating buildings at the end of the plain. The desolate race. The true territory of the desolate race was at the end of the plain. The powerful desolate race which had almost conquered Eternal Kingdom once. Huang pointed into the distance. "That's Desolate City." Yang Yi spoke softly. "Let's take a look around it later." Aling nodded. "All right, take a look around it." Huang chuckled, and his laughter surged into the surroundings. He laughed for a while before he looked ahead. "Brothers of my desolate race, feel free to do your worst." They walked toward the city once he finished speaking. Suddenly, an old man appeared in front of them. Huang Ying's face fell when he saw the old man. Yang Yi and Aling revealed solemn expressions on their faces as well. The old man was no four-world realm expert, he was at the five-world realm. A true five-world realm expert. Huang spoke solemnly. "Elder Mortal Exalt, are you going to act against us yourself?" The old man replied indifferently, "Can't I?" Huang smiled. "Of course you can. But the Patriarch seems to have said that five-world realm experts are prohibited from interfering in our race's internal affairs." Meanwhile, the old man's aura suddenly weakened and weakened. It didn't take long for his aura to cease being at the five-world realm and arrive at the peak of the four-world realm. Suppression. The mortal exalt of the desolate race had forcefully suppressed his cultivation from the five-world realm to the four-world realm. The old man gazed at Huang. "What about now?" Huang Ying gazed at the old man for a long time and said, "Shameless!" Ridicule curled up on the old man's lips. "As far as I'm concerned, those who use their mouths to argue are trash. How can a piece of trash buy the crown prince of my desolate race?" "But he isn't." Suddenly, Yang Yi said, "You're shameless, truly shameless." The old man gazed at Yang Yi and waved his hand. Bang! A wave of powerful energy rippled out and surged at Yang Yi. This casual attack of his wasn't any weaker to the full strength of the Death Guard from before. A true old geezer. Yang Yi didn't show any fear. He took a step forward and swung Executor with both hands. Hiss! Cracks appeared throughout space as it descended. It forcefully obliterated the old man's attack, but Yang Yi was pushed over 30 m back. A 5-world realm expert. Even though the old man was at the 4-world realm now, would anyone really treat him as one? The old man glanced coldly at Yang Yi. "You have some ability, but it isn't enough." The old man vanished on the spot, and then a fist shot toward Yang Yi's head. It was so fast that it was speed beyond anything a 4-world realm expert should possess. Even the Death Guards from before were far inferior in speed. A single punch. Simple and direct. Yang Yi's pupils had constricted the moment that the old man vanished. He didn't dare to hold back at all, and he swung Executor with both hands. The sword domain. 5 swings. When the 5th swing descended, space was sliced open before Executor. Actually, Yang Yi's strength alone wasn't enough to slice open the space here. But the sword in his grasp was different. It was the number 1 sword of Eternal Kingdom, or to be more precise, besides an ordinary sword, it was the number 1 sword in the myriad of universes. Yang Yi's attack struck the old man's fist, but Yang Yi was blasted away instead, and he flew over 30 kilometers away. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth once he descended to the ground. The old man laughed with ridicule. "Your sword isn't bad. Unfortunately, you're too weak. Come, take another punch of mine." He took a step forward and slammed a punch at Yang Yi from afar. Boom! Yang Yi was instantly blasted away. Yang Yi stabbed his sword forward in midair, causing it to enter space slightly and force him to a stop. Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth, and a wisp of ferociousness appeared on his face. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, "The desire to kill? As far as I'm concerned, you're a joke." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man was about to attack when Yang Yi suddenly smiled ferociously. "One attack! I'll defeat you with one attack." A ray of blood-red light suddenly swept out from within Yang Yi. Madness intent. At the same time, a pair of pitch-black wings appeared behind him, the demon wings of death. A single attack. While the old man was at the 4-world realm, was he an ordinary 4-world realm expert? He clearly wasn't. The old man's strength couldn't be judged as being at the 4-world realm. As far as the old man was concerned, Yang Yi's intent to defeat him with a single attack was a joke. Ridicule gradually appeared on the corners of the old man's mouth, and it was about to spread when the ridicule there froze. It was because a pair of black wings had appeared behind Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't give the old man any time to think, and a ray of light flashed. Hiss! Something seemed to be torn open here. At the same time, the old man's figure curled forward and was blasted over 10 kilometers away. Aling and Huang Ying were stunned. He's that strong? Needless to say, they were shocked by the strength Yang Yi displayed with this attack. Both its strength and speed were many levels greater than it had been from any of Yang Yi's previous attacks. It was also why even the old man hadn't been able to avoid it and was struck by it. But the old man was still alive. While he wasn't dead, there was a very deep injury from his forehead to stomach. It was extremely deep. It could be said that if the old man had been just a little slower, just a tiny bit, his body would have been lost, because that attack would have sliced him into 2. After all, Yang Yi's sword was Executor. So, not to mention a 5-world realm expert, even an expert above the 5-world realm would bleed from being hit by it. The old man wiped off the blood on his face and looked up at Yang Yi. At this moment, his face was indescribably ferocious. A dignified 5-world realm expert like him had actually almost died to a single attack from an ant. A humiliation. An absolute humiliation. The old man stared at Xianxia. Two super divine treasures. I have to say, I'm really surprised. But your profound energy is probably exhausted. Right? Xianxia's body was trembling incessantly as he held his sword with both hands, and he'd fallen into a mad state. However, for some reason, he didn't attack the old man. The old man laughed with ridicule, and then he charged at Xianxia. Super divine treasures weren't that easy to use. Xianxia's strength wasn't enough to use them at all, let alone two of them. So, the old man was certain that Xianxia wasn't capable of executing another attack like that. Aling and Huang Ying appeared before Xianxia, and then they vanished on the spot. Bang! Bang! Two powerful auras shot at the old man. The old man grunted coldly when he saw them charge at him, and then he pressed his hands down. Bang! Bang! Two explosions resounded, and then both of them were blasted away. But right at this moment, the old man's pupils constricted because he saw another ray of sword energy. It was exactly like the flash from before. It was too fast, so fast that even the old man couldn't avoid it. Hiss! The old man was blasted away again, and he flew over 30 kilometers away. As soon as he descended to the ground, his palms exploded apart, and his body started to collapse inch by inch while blood sprayed into the surroundings. The old man was shocked by this, and he couldn't be bothered to hold back anymore. Bang! A powerful aura swept out from within him, and the space here instantly shook violently. The 5-world realm. At the critical moment, the old man didn't dare to suppress himself anymore and returned to the 5-world realm. As soon as he did that, he forcefully suppressed the sword energy Xianxia had left within him, and his practically collapsing body was preserved. The 5-world realm. Once his strength returned to the 5-world realm, he immediately glanced at Xianxia's group. There was undisguised killing intent within his eyes. Suddenly, an old man with a jade staff appeared before Xianxia's group. Huang Ying was delighted by the sight of him. Heavenly Exalt. The desolate race had 3 exalts: the Heavenly Exalt, Earthly Exalt, and Mortal Exalt. The mortal and earthly exalts weren't on his side, but the Heavenly Exalt was. Because the Heavenly Exalt was in the same branch of the desolate race as him. The Heavenly Exalt glanced at the Mortal Exalt and spoke indifferently. "You're broken the rules." The Mortal Exalt's face was extremely unsightly. 5-world realm experts couldn't join the battle, but 4-world realm experts could. Yet now, the Mortal Exalt had returned to the 5-world realm. So, strictly speaking, he'd broken the rules. Because if he didn't return to the 5-world realm, Xianxia's attack would have destroyed his body. Once his body was destroyed, it would be a huge loss for him. Not really. Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared by the Mortal Exalt's side. It was the Earthly Exalt. The youngest among them too. Huang Ying's face fell at the sight of this. Obviously, the Earthly Exalt who hadn't declared his stand until now was clearly not on his side. The Earthly Exalt chuckled. "Heavenly Exalt. The Patriarch said that 5-world realm experts are prohibited from interfering in the race's affairs, and we cannot act against others of our race. However," he suddenly gazed at Xianxia and smiled. "According to my knowledge, he isn't from our race." At this moment, Xianxia had recovered his consciousness. It was naturally because of Snowy and in Nanjing. Xianxia glanced at the Earthly Exalt and remained silent. The Mortal Exalt was stunned when he heard this, and then he smiled. "Indeed, he isn't from the desolate race, so it isn't against the rules, right?" The Heavenly Exalt immediately frowned. Meanwhile, Huang Ying walked over to the Heavenly Exalt and said, "Ancestor, Xianxia is a friend of mine. He came with me because he trusts me. So please." The Heavenly Exalt suddenly shook his head. "I can't save him." The Earthly Exalt and Mortal Exalt had joined forces, so he couldn't save Xianxia. It wasn't that he refused to help, he couldn't. That was what he was trying to say. Huang Ying's face instantly became quite unsightly. He couldn't help. Huang Ying gazed at Xianxia, and Xianxia remained silent. Nobody knew that right at this very moment, there was a hall deep beneath the ground, and a middle-aged man without any limbs suddenly looked up. A short while passed before he grinned. Is the desolate race that big of a deal? Meanwhile, Xianxia tightened his grip on his sword. While he was being targeted by 2-5 world realm experts, Xianxia's face was extremely calm. Death? Xianxia wasn't afraid at all. Moreover, as far as he was concerned, even if he had to die, he wouldn't die a coward. He and his sword would never shrink back. The mortal exalt couldn't wait any longer, and was about to attack. But Huangying suddenly spoke. Wait! Everyone gazed at him. Huangying walked over to them and said, Are both of you really going to attack them? The mortal exalt laughed with ridicule. Do you think we're joking? Huangying closed his eyes slowly. A short while later, he flipped his right hand and a golden token appeared there. The earthly exalt and mortal exalt frowned at the sight of it. Huangying gazed at the command token and said, The desolate path token. When I was 24, I obtained it during a competition of our race. It gives me the special authority to make a 5-world realm expert of our race to help me. The mortal exalt's face turned quite unsightly. Actually, it was a way of rewarding the geniuses of their race. He'd had a similar token years ago, but he'd used it already. When one wasn't at the 5-world realm yet, the help of such an expert was huge. He hadn't expected Huangying to have kept it until now. Suddenly, the earthly exalt laughed. You seem to have forgotten then 5-world realm experts aren't allowed to fight each other. Internal strife. As far as the entire desolate race was concerned, the competition between Huangying and the others was just trivial. It was a form of tempering them. However, if even the 5-world realm experts of the desolate race fought against each other, it wouldn't be trivial at all. It would be internal strife and internally exhausting the strength of their race. Thus, 5-world realm experts were prohibited from interfering in their race's affairs. They were far away from authority, and they were prohibited from engaging in any form of internal strife. No one dared to violate this rule. Someone had in the past, and that person still remains imprisoned until this day. It could be said that if the desolate race wasn't deciding on its crown prince, these 5-world realm experts wouldn't have shown themselves at all. Internal strife? Huangying chuckled. Of course I'm aware that it's prohibited, but what if I just ask the heavenly exalt and another elder to escort my friend out of here? If you stop them, then you'll be the one starting internal strife. The earthly exalt's eyes narrowed slightly. A single desolate path token can only make a single 5-world realm expert help you do a single thing. If you do this, you're going to die once the mortal exalt and I suppress our cultivations. Huangying grinned and gazed at Xianxia. Brother Yang, I can't take you around Desolate City anymore. Take care. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised the token and was about to speak, but the heavenly exalt suddenly asked, Are you really going to waste all your hard work? Once Huangying didn't use the token to help himself, it represented that Huangying's journey was over, because the heavenly exalt could never stop both the earthly exalt and mortal exalt. Huangying grinned. I really can't just throw him into a trap like this, and I can't just stand by idly as he dies. He gazed at Xianxia and smiled. This token was one of my trump cards, and I planned to use it at the critical moment to help me through all of this. But I didn't expect that 2 of the 3 exalts in my desolate race were against me. Destiny really does play tricks on all of us. Brother Yang, take care. As he spoke, he crushed the token. Hiss! It transformed into a ray of white light that shot into the air. At the same time, Huangying's voice resounded. Sky Lord, I need your help. As soon as he finished speaking, the Sky Lord appeared before them again. Huangying bowed slightly to the Sky Lord. Please escort my friends out of the desolate world. So long as they left the desolate world, even the earthly exalt and mortal exalt wouldn't dare to look for trouble with Xianxia. They couldn't remain at the 5-world realm out there, and the experts of Eternal Kingdom were outside too. Skylord gazed at Huangying for a long time, and then he smiled. Congratulations, you pass. The earthly exalt glanced at Huangying. He's not cold-blooded and ungrateful. I have no objections. He vanished into the sky once he finished speaking. The mortal exalt glanced at Huangying, and then he gazed at Xianxia. Fearless before powerful enemies and calm before death. You're a man. Welcome to the desolate race. He vanished on the spot. Everyone here was stunned. What's going on? What the heck is the desolate race up to? Yang Yi and the others gazed at Sky Lord, and the latter smiled. It was a test of character. Huang Ying frowned slightly. Character. Sky Lord smiled. Strength isn't the only requirement to be our crown prince. It requires character. It sounds quite laughable, right? Yang Yi nodded. Indeed. Sky Lord roared with laughter and said, Authority! The crown prince of my desolate race has great authority, but its authority the desolate race has given the crown prince to serve us all and not for the crown prince's own desires. The other old geezers and I wanted to see how he would choose between his friends and the position of crown prince. Yang Yi asked, What if he chose position? Sky Lord smiled. Both of you would have died. This is no joke. Yang Yi frowned slightly. The Sky Lord said, Of course, Huang Ying would die too. There is competition in our desolate race, but it doesn't represent that we are ruthless. A ruthless person is only suited to be a general and not the future king of our race. Besides that, if he's someone who even betrays his friends, who knows if he will also do the same to his own race in the future. Right? Loyalty. Yang Yi glanced at Sky Lord and remained silent. The desolate race wasn't really like what he'd expected. Sky Lord gazed at Huang Ying. Of course, the patriarch will decide if you do become the crown prince in the end. After all, there's another fellow with strength and natural talent that surpasses you. Huang Ying asked, The two of them? He was speaking about Huang Tianxing and Huang Yi. Sky Lord shook his head. No, it's another one who has been concealing everything well. If it wasn't for the patriarch, even I would have been deceived by him. You'll find out soon enough. Let's go. Sky Lord turned around and left once he finished speaking. Yang Yi and the others exchanged glances, and Huang Ying smiled. Let me take you around Desolate City. He roared with laughter and strode swiftly toward the city. Aling spoke abruptly. The desolate race is extraordinary. Yang Yi nodded. Miss Aling, you're from Eternal Kingdom, so what do you think of them in comparison to Eternal Kingdom? Aling replied softly. Eternal Kingdom isn't the same as it was. They started preparing for war countless years ago. Yang Yi was puzzled. They've been constantly doing that? Aling nodded. The desolate race retreated all those years ago, and Eternal Kingdom knew that the desolate race would return, sooner or later. So, from then on, Eternal Kingdom started to prepare for war. There is a place in the Eternal Kingdom called the Eternal War Zone. Even year, so long as the geniuses of Eternal Kingdom meet the requirements, they would be sent there. They have endless resources and the personal tutoring of the best experts from Eternal Kingdom in there. If something unexpected hadn't occurred, I too would have gone there. Yang Yi spoke softly. It would be a fierce battle if they do fight, right? Aling replied. A disaster for the entire universe. A disaster for the entire universe. At this moment, they seemed to be able to see the universe in pieces and countless living beings dying miserably. It didn't take long for them to follow Huang Ying into Desolate City. Desolate City floated in midair. It wasn't very huge, or it should be described as ordinary. It was a very ordinary city. Huang Ying suddenly smiled. My ancestor once said that if the desolate race isn't strong, then even a city made of a super divine treasure would be useless. But if my desolate race is strong enough, then even if it's a city made of wood, would anyone dare to attack it? The desolate emperor. Yang Yi and Aling exchanged glances. Needless to say, there was a reason why the desolate race was so strong. They soared up into the sky and entered the city. Ordinary. It was a very ordinary city that was no different from any other city. There were ordinary people and cultivators in the city, and their strengths varied. The only difference was that the atmosphere in this city was unlike any other city. The atmosphere here was lively and lacked viciousness. That was what Yang Yi sensed. As they walked through the streets, some nodded at Huang Ying from time to time, and Huang Ying would respond in the same manner. While these people would size up Yang Yi and Aling, they revealed no hostility and only curiosity. Huang Ying spoke softly as they traveled. Everything is equal in my desolate race. Yang Yi gazed at him. Everything is equal? Huang Ying explained softly. The patriarch once said that using strength to bully the weak is something only weaklings do. Because a truly strong person would not bully the weak, they would only seek out those who are stronger than themselves. Only weaklings would bully the weak to seek satisfaction. There was once a young master who used his father's influence as an elder to do as he pleased in the city, and he even killed someone. Do you know what happened to him? Yang Yi and Aling gazed at Huang Ying while waiting for him to continue. Huang Ying smiled. At that time, our patriarch was in closed-door cultivation, and the crown prince managing our desolate race wanted to get that young master's father over to his side. Thus he chose to close one eye to the matter. In the end, that young master grew even more proud and arrogant, and he did as he pleased in the city. Finally, countless people went to where the patriarch cultivated and begged him to uphold justice. The patriarch showed himself. Aling asked, "What did he do?" Huang Ying spoke softly. The patriarch personally sealed the cultivations of that young master and the crown prince, making them ordinary people. They were sent to the city to make a living for themselves. The feeling of dropping from heaven back to hell is something that perhaps only they can understand. In the end, that young master couldn't bear the huge change in his life and took his own life. He did it right before the city's entrance, and our desolate race considers him a humiliation. Yang Yi asked, "What about the crown prince?" Huang Ying smiled. After dozens of years, the crown prince turned everything around. He completed his old path, or it should be said that he truly recognized his own path and Tao. So, he broke open the patriarch's seal and became one of the supreme experts of our desolate race. Both of you know him. Yang Yi and Aling gazed at Huang Ying. We do. Huang Ying smiled. It's Sky Lord. Sky Lord. The middle-aged man's figure appeared in Yang Ye's mind. Meanwhile, Huang Ying continued. Since then, no one in our race has dared to act as they please in the city. The strong do not act as they please in my desolate race. Besides that, the resources of my desolate race are made available to everyone. Of course, there are preconditions, and it's that we must fight for them. For example, everyone can fight to be the crown prince. Even the most ordinary person in the desolate race and fight for it. Aling spoke softly. No wonder Eternal Kingdom lost all those years ago. Eternal Kingdom used to be selfish, arrogant, and haughty. As far as they were concerned, every other world besides Eternal Kingdom was a low-level world, and the people throughout the universe were low-level beings. Once something reaches the peak, it usually suffers decline. She gazed at Huang Ying and continued. If your race hadn't indiscriminately killed the sprites of this world, perhaps you would have succeeded. Huang Ying laughed bitterly. That was the desolate race's stupidest decision. The sprite progenitor. The sprite progenitor's ability to bring the world together was truly too terrifying. Huang Ying couldn't help but glance at Yang Yi at this point. After all, there was a sprite progenitor with this fellow in front of him. It didn't take long for them to stop. There was a hall before them. Desolate hall. Two people were standing at its entrance. It was Huang Yi and Huang Tianxing who'd restored his physical body. Huang Ying walked over and smiled. Are you still going to continue? Huang Yi spoke indifferently. Congratulations. Congratulations. Obviously, saying that meant he was admitting defeat. While all of them had backing, they were still the most important factor. Because the people who backed them would never engage in internal strife. 5 world realm experts were prohibited from fighting each other. Huang Ying glanced at them and nodded slightly before walking toward the hall. Right when they were about to enter, a voice came from behind them. Wait! They turned around. A woman was standing there. She wore beast skin clothes. She wasn't very old and just around 18 or 19, but she seemed very mature. Her face was icy cold and emotionless. Huang Ying and the others frowned from the sight of her because they didn't recognize her. She spoke indifferently. You want to be the crown prince? Huang Ying nodded. Who are you? She clenched her right fist slowly and said, Huang Tsangyue. Huang Tsangyue. Huang Ying was stunned and gazed at Huang Yi. The latter spoke solemnly. Since she has the which represents sky, She must be from the Sky Lord's line. The desolate race had 9 main lines that carried the purest bloodlines. The rest of their people could only be considered as commoners. Even though they had the bloodline of the desolate race, it was very scarce. Of course, if they could awaken the bloodline within them, then it would be a completely different situation. Huang Ying restrained his thoughts and gazed at her. "Do you need something?" She spoke indifferently. "Nothing much. I just want to see what right you have to be our crown prince." She suddenly attacked once she finished speaking. A punch. She suddenly appeared before Huang Ying and slammed a punch at him. The expressions of everyone here changed from the sight of this. Huang Ying's expression even changed drastically. He slammed a palm forward, and powerful energy rippled out of it. Bam! An explosion resounded, and then Huang Ying was pushed over 10 kilometers back. Suddenly, Huang Zongyue vanished on the spot, and she was in front of him when she appeared again. However, her punch didn't slam down upon him. It slammed down to the right of his head. Boom! That expanse of space was instantly obliterated. Everyone here was stunned. Even with their strength, the space here was impossible to destroy without a super divine treasure. However, she'd accomplished it with just a punch. So how terrifying was her strength? The barbarian physique. Suddenly, Sword Scroll's voice resounded in Yang Ye's head. "It's one of the 10 great physiques like Miss N's martial god physique." Meanwhile, Huang Zongyue gazed at Yang Yi. "Tell that woman with the martial god physique to show herself. I want to see if her physique or mine is stronger." Yang Yi hadn't even said anything when a Nanjing appeared in front of him. And Nanjing gazed calmly at Huang Zongyue. "I don't want to fight you." "Why?" Huang Zongyue laughed coldly. "Are you afraid?" And Nanjing replied indifferently. "I'm afraid that I'll kill you." Yang Yi was stunned speechless. "I'm afraid that I'll kill you." Yang Ye's face darkened. "Can't you say it in a nicer way? Saying that will easily incur hatred from her." Sure enough, as soon as a Nanjing finished speaking, Huang Zongyue's face turned icy cold, and then she leaped up and appeared before a Nanjing. Her fist shot forward. It easily blasted open the space in the surroundings. Meanwhile, a Nanjing's spear moved abruptly. Her spear shot forward. A powerful and confident attack. Everyone sensed great confidence coming from a Nanjing's attack. It was invincible confidence, the confidence to crush her enemy with a single attack. Bang! An explosion resounded and Huang Zongyue was blasted 300 m away. As soon as she stopped herself, her arm exploded apart and transformed into a pile of blood. At the same time, the ground beneath her cracked open. Everyone was shocked. And Nanjing was actually so strong? Even Yang Yi was shocked. While he hadn't fought her, he knew that she was very strong. However, he hadn't expected her to actually be this strong. And Nanjing stood on the spot and glanced at Huang Zongyue. "You're still too young." She entered the primordial pagoda once she finished speaking. "Too young." Yang Yi shook his head. Actually, he was probably the only one here who really understood what a Nanjing meant. She meant that Huang Zongyue was a little young, and she wasn't actually looking down on Huang Zongyue. If she looked down on a person, then based on a Nanjing's character, she wouldn't even say a word. Just as she'd said, Huang Zongyue really was a little young when compared to a Nanjing. Moreover, a Nanjing hadn't just received the guidance of Wu and I and martial ancestor. She'd received guidance from that mysterious spear-wielding middle-aged man. All of them weren't ordinary. Huang Zongyue revealed quite a ferocious expression. Obviously, she felt that a Nanjing was insulting her. So, she immediately leaped forward and charged at Yang Yi. The powerful energy she emanated caused space to ripple violently. Yang Yi frowned when he saw her attack him. Suddenly, a powerful aura pressed down upon her and forced her to a stop. A middle-aged man appeared in front of Yang Yi. It was Sky Lord. Sky Lord walked over to Huang Zongyue. "Can't accept a defeat?" Huang Zongyue spoke ferociously. "I haven't lost. Shut your mouth." Sky Lord spoke abruptly in a domineering manner. Huang Zongyue glanced at him and didn't dare to talk back. Sky Lord spoke indifferently. You endured for so many years just to shock everyone, and I understand that. People like to be looked up to, and they want to be respected. But if you grow obsessed with that, it will do more harm than good. Huang Songyue's face was gloomy, and she remained silent. Sky Lord shook his head and sighed. The heavens gave you a great physique, but you do not cherish it. Huang Songyue looked him in the eyes. Sky Lord, I refuse to accept this. Why are you so sure that I'm no match for her? Just because I was at a momentary disadvantage. Sky Lord shook his head. Comparing both of you is like comparing an adult to a child. She is right, you are a little too young. Huang Songyue stared at him. I want to fight her again. She can do as she pleases if I lose. Sky Lord fell silent for a short while and gazed at Yang Yi. Young brother Yang, can you ask Missin to come outside for a spar? Just consider it as me owing both of you a favor. Yang Yi glanced at him. Obviously, Sky Lord wanted to help Huang Songyue. Yang Yi naturally wouldn't refuse this favor. He nodded, and then a Nanjing appeared in front of him. Huang Songyue immediately revealed a ferocious expression when she saw a Nanjing. A Nanjing gazed at Huang Songyue. Attack me! Everyone else moved back and made space for them. Huang Songyue slowly clenched her fists. Crack! The space around her cracked open. Strength. Barbaric strength. The barbarian physique had a type of strength with it, barbaric strength. It was strength that came naturally with the physique, and it was much more terrifying than the strength of some primal demons. It was undeniable that there was no such thing as fairness at most times. Some people were born blessed. Countless strands of barbaric energy converged within her, and it was like a volcano waiting to erupt. Just the pressure coming from it made some of the people here feel slightly suffocated. In the primordial pagoda and on the ascension platform, Arya sat on the platform as she looked up into the sky and licked her tonghulu. A short while passed before she suddenly said, Snowy, I want to eat that woman. Snowy blinked and raised her paws. Obviously, she was asking why. Arya sneaked a glance at the surroundings and whispered, Snowy, let me tell you a secret. Snowy blinked, floated over to Arya, and perked up her ears. Arya seemed to have thought of something and said, You can't tell anyone about it. Snowy hurriedly nodded. Arya shot another glance at the surroundings, and when she noticed no one, she said, Snowy, I really want to eat her because her body is unlike other ordinary people. Big sister and two. I've wanted to eat her on many occasions. My intuition tells me that if I eat her, I'll definitely grow even stronger. Besides that, there's also Big Sister Xiao. I think she's really delicious too. And Big Brother Yang is another. Snowy was stunned for quite some time, and then she placed her paw on Arya's forehead. She doesn't have a fever. Arya rolled her eyes. I'm not lying. I really want to eat them, but I can't. Firstly, I'm no match for all of them, especially Big Sister Xiao and An. They are so terrifying. I can only think about it, but I dare not take action. Right, if it's Big Brother Yang, I may succeed if I risk my life against him. But he's Big Brother Yang, so even if I can defeat him, I can't eat him. Sigh. This is so painful. Snowy thought for a moment, and then she withdrew a tonghulu and passed it to Arya. She was telling Arya that she should just eat more tonghulus. Arya was filled with sorrow and despair. Outside the primordial pagoda, after she converged countless strands of barbaric energy, she leaped up and charged at a Nanjing. The powerful energy contained within her collapsed space in her wake. At the same time, a wave of powerful pressure slammed against a Nanjing before she arrived. A Nanjing's face remained indifferent as she took a step forward, and then she stabbed her spear at Huang Songyue. It was a very ordinary stab without any flashy moves, and it didn't cause any fluctuations or phenomena to occur. It was just a simple stab of the spear. However, it was such a simple stab that obliterated all the pressure coming from Huang Songyue. Meanwhile, Huang Songyue's fist arrived. The fist and spear collided. Boom! The space in a huge area shook and started to crack open. Sky Lord frowned slightly and waved his right hand, causing the surrounding space to instantly return to normal. and Nanjing and Huang Zongyue were still in a deadlock. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Huang Zongyue's eyes, and the barbaric energy within her surged madly into her right hand before surging along her right arm. However, and Nanjing still didn't move at all. Madness and ferocity covered Huang Zongyue's face as she twisted her right hand. Bang! And Nanjing was pushed around 10 steps back. At this moment, and Nanjing suddenly frowned. She released her spear, pressed forward, and slammed a punch at Huang Zongyue. It slammed directly against Huang Zongyue's face. Bang! Blood sprayed. Huang Zongyue was pushed backward, and Nanjing grabbed the moment she was being pushed back to grab Huang Zongyue's right hand, and the latter wasn't even able to react before Nanjing pulled with her right hand. Huang Zongyue was instantly pulled forward, and then a knee slammed against her stomach. Huang Zongyue's figure curled forward while a mouthful of blood sprayed from her. However, that wasn't the end of it. At the instant Nanjing's knee slammed against her stomach, and Nanjing suddenly spun around, and her right elbow slammed against Huang Zongyue's face. Bam! Huang Zongyue was blasted away while an arc of blood sprayed through the air. Meanwhile, a spear appeared in Nanjing's grasp, and she was about to hurl it. If she did that, it was obvious that Huang Zongyue, who was unconscious now, wouldn't be able to avoid death. However, Sky Lord suddenly said, "Missin, please show mercy." And Nanjing movement stopped, and then she put the spear away and walked over to Yang Yi. Was that amazing? Yang Yi gave her 2 thumbs up. Amazing. Truly amazing. That was what Yang Yi really felt. And Nanjing grinned, and Yang Yi was stunned by this. He hadn't been able to see that smile to his satisfaction as she'd immediately entered the primordial pagoda right after. Yang Yi was stunned speechless. Meanwhile, Huang Zongyue laid on the ground with a blank expression on her face. She muttered as if she'd lost her soul. Impossible! Impossible! She'd lost. She'd completely lost. She didn't even have the ability to fight back against a Nanjing. Was she weak? Meanwhile, Sky Lord walked over to her. Is the barbarian physique very amazing? It isn't, not even in the slightest. You must understand that it's the person itself that's amazing, and if you don't work hard and fight for it, even an invincible physique would be useless. The gap between the two of you isn't in natural talent or resources, it's a gap in your mentality. Simply speaking, she's a tiger in the forest, and you're a tiger raised at home. While you're both tigers, your experience, mental states, and strength are far apart. Huang Zongyue was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she gazed at the Sky Lord. I refuse to accept this. Sky Lord frowned. Suddenly, a sword pressed against her forehead, and it pierced into her skin, causing blood to flow. Everyone gazed at Yang Yi because he was holding that sword. Yang Yi ignored them and gazed at Huang Zongyue. You refuse to accept it? If it wasn't out of consideration for Sky Lord, she would have killed you by now. Yet you still refuse to accept it? Fuck you. Come, you can fight me. I don't have any physique, but I guarantee that I'll kill you. Yang Yi really couldn't bear to continue watching. Losing wasn't shameful. Being unable to accept it was shameful. Huang Zongyue clearly couldn't accept her defeat. Huang Zongyue was exasperated from being insulted by Yang Yi, and she cursed, "Who do you think you are? You..." Suddenly, Yang Yi kicked her stomach. Bang! Huang Zongyue flew over 1 kilometer away. Yang Yi hadn't held back at all, so the sharp pain of it caused her face to warp. Meanwhile, Yang Yi appeared in front of her again. Huang Ying hesitated for a moment and was about to speak, but Sky Lord stopped him. Huang Ying gazed at Sky Lord with bewilderment, and the latter spoke softly. She has talent, but she's too proud. If that pride of hers isn't destroyed, she'll become mediocre in the future. Huang Ying nodded and didn't say anything else. Yang Yi ridiculed while standing by Huang Zongyue's side. The barbarian physique? Is that the source of your pride? Tell me, what else do you have besides that? Huang Zongyue glared at him, and it was like her eyes could spew flames. Yang Yi looked down at her and said, Do you know what's the difference between the two of you? It's that even if she loses the martial god physique, she's still the same person. Her strength doesn't come solely from her physique, it comes from her heart and will. But take a look at yourself. You give in to despair from the slightest setback, and you can't even realize the truth of things. Without the desolate race there to protect you, trash like you would probably die in the outside world before you even know what killed you. Yang Yi turned around and walked over to Huang Ying. Brother Huang Ying, let's get back to business. Huang Ying nodded and entered the hall with Yang Yi and Aling. Only Sky Lord and Huang Zongyue remained here. A long time passed before Huang Zongyue closed her eyes slowly, and then another long while passed before she suddenly said, "She's truly strong, truly strong." When she recalled the previous battle, Huang Zongyue realized that she wasn't on the same level as a Nanjing. Sky Lord spoke softly. "The gap in strength between you and her isn't very huge, but do you know why you lost in an instant?" Huang Zongyue gazed at him. He explained softly, "It's mainly because of your mental state and your combat instinct. Your mental state is 80% of the reason. When you failed to defeat her with an attack that carried your full strength, your heart started to shake. Or to be more precise, you started to panic. Once that happens, your mind falls into chaos. As for her, her mental state remained the same throughout the battle." Huang Zongyue fell silent for a long time. "What would my chances of winning be if I didn't panic?" Sky Lord shook his head. "Her attainments in the martial Tao are a level higher than you, and her combat instinct isn't inferior to even the strongest death guard of our race. You must remember that the barbarian physique isn't someone you should take pride in. It is a burden. You must treat it as a burden. Just as Yang Yi said, think about it. What do you have if you lose the barbaric physique and barbaric energy?" Huang Zongyue's hands trembled while her face turned ghastly pale. Sky Lord asked, "Do you know why we do not seize the sprite progenitor when we know that he has it?" She shook her head. Sky Lord smiled. "Because we never entrust our hopes on someone else. We rely on ourselves for everything. Moreover, Eternal Kingdom wants to kill him and take the sprite progenitor, and doing so undoubtedly makes them mortal enemies. My enemy's enemy is my friend. Our desolate race is willing to become his friend. As for the sprite progenitor, do you think Yang Yi would take the Eternal Kingdom's side?" Huang Zongyue spoke seriously. "Isn't it better to have the sprite progenitor under our control? Yang Yi and her may be extraordinary geniuses, but they don't belong to our desolate race, right?" The Sky Lord smiled. "He has backing. Backing." Huang Zongyue frowned and wanted to ask about it, but Sky Lord shook his head. "Once you've recovered, come to Death Guard camp. It'll be good for you." He vanished on the spot. Huang Zongyue spoke softly. "No wonder. If Yang Yi didn't have any backing, it was obvious that the desolate race would never give up on obtaining the sprite progenitor just for Yang Yi. Yang Ye's strength was formidable, but it was far insufficient to go against the entire desolate race. So here lied the problem. Who was backing Yang Yi? Because that person was actually able to make the desolate race make a compromise, give up the sprite progenitor, and become friends with Yang Yi. Once they entered the hall, an old man with a saber scar on his face was standing in the air above. Huang Ying bowed slightly to the old man. "Grand Elder." Huang Ying had a very respectful expression on his face. Grand Elder. The status of the old man before them was merely inferior to the patriarch. Just like Sky Lord, he only obeyed the patriarch. Moreover, the Grand Elder was the leader of all elders, and his level was even higher than the heavenly exalt, earthly exalt, and mortal exalt. The Grand Elder glanced at Huang Ying, nodded slightly, and then gazed at Yang Yi. "Can you let me see her?" He was naturally referring to Snowy. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and nodded, and then he summoned Snowy. Snowy glanced at the surroundings once she came outside, and then she shook her head and went back into the primordial pagoda when she didn't detect any treasures. Yang Yi was stunned speechless by this. The sprite progenitor. Meanwhile, the Grand Elder spoke softly. "It really is the sprite progenitor." A wisp of complicated emotions flashed through his eyes at this point. The desolate race's defeat all those years ago could be attributed entirely to the sprite progenitor. Now that he saw a sprite progenitor again, it naturally aroused complicated emotions in him. Did he hate sprite progenitors? Actually, if he were to be honest, he didn't really hate sprite progenitors. All those years ago, the desolate race had gone too far when it came to some things. Especially when they slaughtered the sprites of Eternal Kingdom. Actually, many within the desolate race didn't support such actions. Unfortunately, that person, the patriarch's own younger brother, had acted willfully and insisted on it. In the end, it made the sprite progenitor join the war. He'd witnessed the sprite progenitor in action all those years ago. That sprite progenitor had merely said something toward the world, and just that caused the desolate race to lose a winning war. The old man shook his head slightly and restrained his thoughts before looking at Huang Ying. He flicked a violet command token over and said, "From this moment onward, you're the desolate race's crown prince. Besides the 5 world realm experts of our desolate race, you can give orders to everyone else. Besides that, while 5 world realm experts are not under your command, we cannot interfere with your decisions either." The old man vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. The crown prince. Huang Ying glanced at the command token and fell silent. Aling suddenly smiled. "Congratulations!" Huang Ying laughed bitterly. "You know, I really yearned for this command token before I got it. But now that I have, it feels so heavy to me." Heavy. While the position of crown prince gave him a lot of authority, he had a lot of responsibilities on his shoulders too. Aling said, "It's normal for responsibilities to be heavy." Huang Ying smiled. "All right, forget that. Brother Yang, Miss Aling, my desolate race has a martial pavilion and Dao pavilion. In the martial pavilion, there are books on all sorts of techniques that my desolate race has gathered for many years. As for the Dao pavilion, it contains the comprehensions of my desolate race's ancestors. Amongst them are numerous powerful secret techniques that are considered precious treasures in my desolate race. Are you interested in having a look?" They exchanged glances and nodded. Only a fool would refuse that. Huang Ying chuckled. He was about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly asked, "Do you have records on the war from all those years ago?" Yang Yi was quite curious about that war. Huang Ying nodded. "If you're interested, I can take you to a place first. You'll be able to witness the war there." Aling suddenly said, "Your desolate race recorded it?" Huang Ying nodded. "Our patriarch said that failure is not terrifying. What's terrifying is the inability to face failure. We lost all those years ago, so he used a supreme technique to reproduce some of the scenes from that war so that the later generations would be able to see it for themselves." Yang Yi nodded. "That's perfect." Huang Ying nodded and led the two of them out of the hall. It didn't take long for him to bring them to a pond. In the pond was crystal clear water and nothing else. Huang Ying walked to the side of it and tapped his finger forward. For eternal divine crystals dropped into the pillars on each corner of the pond, and then the water within it started to ripple. The water suddenly shot up and formed a screen of water before them. Within it was a huge world. Aling's eyes narrowed slightly from the sight of the world. It was Eternal Kingdom. It started off being quite blurry, but after Huang Ying tossed in a few more eternal divine crystals, it grew more and more clearer. Eternal Kingdom, but it was in a mess. Corpses, blood, and severed limbs filled the entire world. And Eternal Kingdom itself was covered in the flames of war. Suddenly, Yang Ye's pupils constricted. A woman in a white dress appeared in the sky above Eternal Kingdom. The sprite progenitor. It was the sprite progenitor Yang Yi met in the primal battlefield. The sprite progenitor glanced at the surroundings. Besides the corpses of humans and demons, there were many corpses of sprites too. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man with red hair was carrying out an insane slaughter not too far away from the woman in a white dress. The red-haired middle-aged man wasn't just slaughtering humans and some demons, he was slaughtering sprites too. All of those sprites had been captured. Slaughter intent. Yang Ye's gaze descended onto the middle-aged man, and the man was emanating extremely thick and powerful slaughter intent. The middle-aged man killed as he roared, "Kill! Kill everything in Eternal Kingdom! Ha ha ha!" The woman's gaze gradually turned icy cold. Suddenly, she took a step forward. "The desolate race is heartless, so assist me." World. In an instant, The desolate race is heartless. So assist me. World. Once she spoke these words, the world instantly changed. The spirit energy around the experts of the desolate race instantly vanished without a trace. Besides that, countless forms of energy throughout the world started to converge here. There was the energy of the five elements: space, earth, lightning. In short, at this moment, all energy that naturally occurred in the world had appeared here. Pressure. Pressure that could crush the world suddenly appeared here, and it pressed down upon the experts of the desolate race. Natural pressure. The world and everything in it took eternal kingdom side. Even people. As soon as she spoke those words, everything in the world seemed to be summoned by her. Thus, countless natural divine treasures surged madly in eternal kingdom's direction. Besides that, many experts who'd remained hidden in eternal kingdom had stepped forward. Most of them were experts who owed her a favor. As for those worlds that had remained neutral until now, they made their stands clear once she made that summon. All of them took eternal kingdom's side, including eternal border, which had remained neutral until now. Even Hell World, the northern desolate world, all of them took eternal kingdom's side. Just a single command had changed the entire situation of the war. At this moment, everything had taken eternal kingdom's side. The most terrifying part was that the desolate beasts and countless mysterious living beings that were on the desolate race's side had actually stopped and gazed at the woman. None of them dared to fight. It was awe that came naturally. The situation instantly changed. The red-haired man in front of the woman glanced at the surroundings, and the ferocity on his face grew even greater when he noticed the situation that the desolate race was in. He suddenly looked up at her, and then he transformed into a ray of red light that charged at the woman. "How dare you!" Suddenly, countless furious shouts resounded from within Eternal Kingdom, and then numerous terrifying auras shot up into the air and charged at him. "Fuck off!" The man howled with fury and swung his palm like a saber. Hiss! A ray of blood-red saber energy that was around 3 kilometers long slashed down. It simply seemed like it was going to slash the world apart. Meanwhile, countless experts that charged out from Eternal Kingdom were forcefully slammed down by the powerful pressure the saber energy emanated. The woman gazed at the saber energy with indifference. When it arrived a few meters above her, a ray of golden light slammed against it. Bang! The blood-red saber energy exploded apart and transformed into energy that rained down from above. The golden light dispersed before her and became a golden dragon. A primal true dragon. Area, snowy, and the primal true dragon had suddenly appeared by Xianxia's side. The primal true dragon gazed at the dragon in the screen of water, and its eyes had a trace of bewilderment in them. Snowy, on the other hand, was looking at the woman in a white dress. Her paws were clenched tight, and no one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, the red-haired man in the screen of light had quite a gloomy expression on his face when he saw the primal true dragon. "Are the true dragons planning to interfere in my desolate race's business too?" The primal true dragon looked down at him. "We owe the sprite progenitor a favor, and it's time to repay it." The red-haired man spoke ferociously. "According to my knowledge, there aren't many primal true dragons left. Aren't you afraid of going extinct?" The primal true dragon spoke with disdain. "Try it if you can." A wisp of ferocity curled up onto the man's lips, and then he transformed into a blood-red ray of light that shot up into the sky. Meanwhile, the primal true dragon fearlessly dived down and slammed itself at the man. Meanwhile, a few dozen figures shot down into Eternal Kingdom like a sword, and they left corpses in their wake. They were unstoppable. They were the desolate Death Guard. The woman glanced down at the desolate Death Guards, fell silent for a moment, and then suddenly looked toward the right. "Please help!" "As you wish." As soon as these words were spoken, a ray of sword energy shot down from far away in the sky, and then a middle-aged man with a sword chest on his back appeared before the desolate Death Guards. Besides that, there were a few dozen sword cultivators behind him. In reality, Sword Scroll suddenly appeared by Xianxia's side. She had quite a complicated gaze as she looked at the sword cultivators on the screen. Xianxia glanced at her and remained silent. The ancient sword sect. Huang Ying spoke softly by Yang Ye's side, a mysterious sect of sword cultivators. They can be considered as the representatives of sword cultivators in Eternal Kingdom. They always remained aloof from the world, and their disciples were usually just traveling the world. But along with the sprite progenitor's request for help, 90% of their sect came to her aid. If it wasn't for them, my desolate race's death guards would have fought their way to the eternal divine palace of Eternal Kingdom. Yang Yi looked up, and he saw the death guards were being forcefully stopped there. However, the death guards were suppressing those sword cultivators in battle. The sword cultivators' ability in single combat was beyond doubt. But these death guards were even more terrifying. Every one of them was fearless of death, and their insane attacks started to push the sword cultivators back. The woman frowned slightly. Suddenly, the middle-aged man below soared up into the air and formed a seal. In an instant, a hall made of swords appeared behind him. A sword hall. Yang Yi was stunned, and then he gazed at Sword Scroll. She was looking indifferently at the screen of water. Once the sword hall appeared, a thick book floated above it. The sword book. The middle-aged man formed another seal, and the sword hall behind him suddenly shook, and then countless rays of light surged out from it. A dense expanse of sword energy. Once the sword energy appeared, the sword cultivators below retreated. The death guards didn't try to dodge when facing the sword energy because they had nowhere to escape. They could only clash head-on against it. Rumble. Explosions resounded incessantly, and the death guards joined forces to forcefully stop all the sword energy. However, they were being pushed back repeatedly. Moreover, sword energy was still surging out incessantly from the sword hall. It was truly endless. The death guards were constantly being pushed back. Moreover, some of them died from a ray of sword energy through the heart. Besides that, the other experts of the desolate race were forcefully pushed back by these rays of sword energy too. The experts and sprites throughout the universe rushed to Eternal Border. Not only were there humans among them, there were even primal divine beasts. The desolate race was strong, but it couldn't resist the joint forces of the entire universe. So, they were pushed back repeatedly, all the way out of Eternal Kingdom to Eternal Border. The desolate race's loss was only a matter of time, because many more experts were rushing in their direction. The experts of Eternal Kingdom and the entire universe were exceptionally united. Countless had even started to cheer. However, along with an explosion, the dreams everyone had were obliterated. In the sky above Eternal Border, space shook violently, and then a corpse appeared. The corpse of an old man. The old man's corpse descended slowly, and everyone was stunned by the sight of it. The Eternal Lord. The old man was the master of Eternal Kingdom. He was dead? A middle-aged man with hair that hung loosely to his shoulder appeared there. The desolate emperor. The strongest expert of the desolate world. In the real world, everyone gazed at the desolate emperor. He was the man who'd almost destroyed Eternal Kingdom all those years ago. A thought suddenly arose in Yang Ye's mind. If the desolate emperor is compared to Wu Ni, martial ancestor, the mysterious sword cultivator below the northern sword sect, the old man with the bamboo chest, the unfettered one, and Xianxia, who would be stronger? All of them were peak experts. Yang Yi shook his head and chuckled. Why do I even waste time thinking of such meaningless things? My own strength is the right way. Yang Yi continued watching the scene on the screen of water. Along with the arrival of the desolate emperor, the world fell silent. Completely silent. Everyone gazed at him. Countless people of the desolate race were overjoyed and cheered. Patriarch! Patriarch! Their voices shot into the clouds. The atmosphere on Eternal Kingdom side was very oppressive. The Eternal Lord was invincible in their hearts. Yet now, he was dead. The desolate emperor had killed him. So, how strong was the desolate emperor? The desolate emperor glanced at the woman. Why have you interfered? Why? The sprite progenitor remained aloof from the world. Regardless of whether the desolate race or any other force entered this place, they would not target the sprite progenitor, because they knew how special she was. Moreover, All powers needed her help, including the desolate race. She replied indifferently, "The desolate race is heartless and deserves death." The desolate emperor frowned slightly and looked down. It didn't take long for his face to turn gloomy. He saw the corpses of countless sprites. The desolate emperor closed his eyes slowly. A long time passed before the scenes from 2 hours ago appeared within his mind. A short while later, he gazed at the red-haired man. "Did I not say that sprites which do not go against my desolate race should not be harmed?" The man spoke in a low voice. "I got mad with the desire to slaughter." The desolate emperor's eyes narrowed. "You deserve death." The red-haired man's expression changed. He was about to speak, but the desolate emperor ignored him and looked at the middle-aged sword cultivator. "Did you have fun killing the people of my desolate race?" As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his right hand and flicked his palm at the middle-aged man. A ray of sword energy shot up into the air. The middle-aged sword cultivator had counterattacked. However, that casual attack from the desolate emperor instantly suppressed the middle-aged man. And as soon as he descended to the ground, his body exploded apart, and so did the sword hall behind him. At this moment, Yang Yi finally knew what happened to Sword Scroll's main body. Yang Yi glanced at her. Her face was emotionless, and she didn't say a word before entering the primordial pagoda. Yang Yi looked up at the screen, and it had vanished. Aling asked, "Is there no more?" Huang Ying nodded. "The records end there. However, you know what happened after that. While our patriarch was strong, the entire desolate would have been buried in that battle if he allowed it to continue. Moreover, a mysterious expert seemed to have stepped forward at that time." Yang Yi gazed at him. "A mysterious expert?" Huang Ying nodded. "However, I don't know who it was. As for those who do know, they refuse to reveal it." Huang Ying shook his head. "Forget that. Brother Yang, Miss Aling, let me take you to the Martial Pavilion." They nodded. It didn't take long for them to get to the Martial Pavilion, and Huang Ying smiled. 3 days. You only have 3 days. Because my contribution points are only enough for you to stay here for 3 days. Aling smiled. You're the crown prince. Huang Ying laughed bitterly. Besides the patriarch, everyone else has to pay contribution points to access this place. Even the crown prince. We're all treated as equals. As for the patriarch, his existence is the greatest contribution to our race. Anyway, I have something to attend to. Brother Yang, Miss Aling, take your time and look around. I'm sure the things in there will be of help to you. He cupped his fist at them and left. Yang Yi and Aling exchanged glances and entered the pavilion. Once they parted, Huang Ying went to a mountain in the city. It was the tallest mountain within the city. Huang Ying didn't go up to its top, and he just stopped at the mountainside and bowed slightly. A long time passed before a drop of blood floated down from above and descended before him. Huang Ying hurriedly withdrew the violet command token from before, and the blood entered it. The command token trembled slightly, and then it turned red. A protection talisman. If he wanted to truly become the crown prince, he needed a person's acknowledgement, and that person was the desolate emperor. Now, the desolate emperor had clearly acknowledged him. Huang Ying bowed slightly toward the mountain and was about to leave, but a wave of energy suddenly enveloped him and brought him to the mountain top. A man with hair that hung loosely to his shoulders was seated just a few meters away from Huang Ying. Huang Ying naturally knew who it was, so he immediately bowed respectfully. Patriarch! It was the desolate emperor. A short while passed before the desolate emperor spoke. Do you know why I wanted to choose a crown prince? Huang Ying shook his head. Please enlighten me. The man stood up and looked into the distant sky. My desolate race lost the battle all those years ago. I led our race away in retreat to rest and recuperate. Now, you're all definitely thinking that we're going to attack Eternal Kingdom again, right? Huang Ying hesitated for a moment and asked, Aren't we? The desolate emperor spoke softly. War is unavoidable. But this time, we don't hold the initiative anymore, and Eternal Kingdom isn't the same Eternal Kingdom we once faced either. Of course, it's normal because if even that war wasn't able to wake them up, then they would truly be trash. I'll leave the internal affairs of our desolate race to you. You aren't capable enough to deal with the external affairs, so just leave it to me. Besides that, befriending Yang Yi was a bold move. My desolate race needs someone bold. As for strength, it doesn't matter if yours is slightly inferior, it can be trained slowly. But a patriarch must be bold and willing to take risks. So, your eldest brother and Huang Yi are inferior in that aspect. Huang Ying bowed slightly to the desolate emperor and remained silent. The desolate emperor waved his hand lightly. Huang Ying bowed once more and left. Once Huang Ying left, a middle-aged man without any limbs appeared before the desolate emperor. If Yang Yi was here, he would recognize the man. It was the original owner of Executor. The desolate emperor glanced at the man. "What's your name?" The man spoke softly. "They call me the Obsessed Sword. As for my original name, Chun Xuanan." The desolate emperor asked, "Yang Yi is your disciple?" Chun Xuanan shook his head. "Not really, but I like him," the desolate emperor said. "He shows no restraint. Even though he's learning to restrain himself, he's still like that deep within his bones." Chun Xuanan smiled. "The young wouldn't be called the young if they weren't like that, right? We were probably worse than him during our youths. Don't you think so too?" The desolate emperor nodded slightly. "True." As he spoke, he looked up at the sky. "While you're dead, I can still sense how strong you once were. Is it really that strong?" Chun Xuanan smiled. "It's much stronger than you've imagined." The desolate emperor fell silent for a long time and said, "Which era are you from?" Chun Xuanan replied, "The primordial." Primordial. Fluctuations arose in the desolate emperor's eyes. "A forgotten era." Chun Xuanan shook his head slightly. "It doesn't matter to any of us." He gazed at the desolate emperor and continued, "Thank you." He was thanking the desolate emperor on Xianxia's behalf, because the desolate race had given up on the sprite progenitor. It could be said that if the desolate emperor insisted on obtaining the sprite progenitor, then even he wouldn't be able to stop the desolate emperor. After all, he was dead. Of course, he wasn't without any remedy. He couldn't stop the desolate emperor in his current state, but besides the desolate emperor, no one else in the desolate race was a match for him. Moreover, Yang Yi had Wu and I and the martial ancestor too. While the three of them were dead, even if their joint forces weren't enough to annihilate the desolate race, crippling it wouldn't be difficult at all. The desolate emperor was clearly aware of that. While he wasn't afraid of them, he felt that it wasn't necessary. After all, wasn't it better to have more friends instead of making more powerful enemies? Chun Xuanan didn't speak further. He just turned around and left. Meanwhile, the desolate emperor suddenly said, "A clone of mine encountered a sword cultivator in the primal battlefield. He was a very powerful sword cultivator." Chun Xuanan stopped and said, "We've met." The desolate emperor asked, "What do you think of him?" Chun Xuanan smiled. "You want to know who's stronger, right?" The desolate emperor nodded. Chun Xuanan smiled. "Actually, I want to know the answer to that too. Unfortunately, we're not from the same era." He vanished without a trace once he finished speaking. A long time passed before the desolate emperor vanished as well. The mountaintop was quiet once more. The martial pavilion. Once they entered the martial pavilion, they noticed that it was much larger than they'd expected. The tiny pavilion actually seemed to have another world within it. But they were puzzled by the fact that no one seemed to be guarding the place, and there were no experts outside the pavilion. Aling spoke softly. "The desolate race isn't ordinary at all." Yang Yi nodded. He'd seen many clans and races since he started his journey on Profounder Continent, but the desolate race was the most unique. Of course, it was also the strongest. Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something and said, "Miss Aling, about the D clan?" She smiled. "What is it?" Yang Yi said, "Let me know if you need my help." She smiled. "Thank you." Yang Yi nodded. He didn't say anything else and just walked off. She glanced at him, didn't say anything either, and walked to a nearby bookshelf. There were around 10 bookshelves here, and every single one of them had 10 shelves. Every shelf had around 10 scrolls. All of them were scrolls with supreme knowledge of the martial arts. Not a single one of them was of low quality. Could be said that it was Huang Ying's way of repaying them. Yang Yi summoned a Nanjing, and she glanced at the surroundings before casually picking up a scroll. She was instantly immersed in it once she took a glance at its contents. Yang Yi immediately realized that the scrolls here were rare treasures. Otherwise, based on how selective she was, ordinary techniques would just incur her disdain. But she had been able to continue reading a scroll he casually picked up. So, it was obvious how high quality the scrolls here were. Yang Yi ignored her and walked to the side. It didn't take long for him to arrive before a bookshelf. And on it was a pitch-black character? Obviously, the scrolls in this bookshelf were sword techniques. Yang Yi opened one of them, and a few words appeared before him. Dual swords. Dual swords? Yang Yi was stunned. What the heck? Yang Yi was curious and decided to continue reading, and a solemn expression gradually appeared on his face. He read through it for around 2 hours, and then he put it down and entered the primordial pagoda. Dual swords. Wild joy covered Yang Ye's face, because he'd suddenly thought of something. His madness sword technique. It allowed him to swing 100 times in a breath of time, but what if he used dual swords? Would its strength multiply? Was it realistic? Yang Yi didn't know, but he planned to find out. In any case, he has no lack of swords. Yang Yi didn't use executor. He placed it within the sword gourd and picked up the sword precursor and sword supreme instead. His intuition told him that these two swords were more suitable. The scroll he read had a detailed description on how to wield dual swords, and it included many techniques and skills as well. Yang Yi didn't follow exactly what was recorded in the scroll. Simply speaking, he was using that technique to perfect his madness sword technique. Was using swords in both hands difficult? It wasn't difficult for Yang Yi, because he'd used the sword and saber together in the past, and he'd merged them perfectly as well. Now, he was changing the saber to the sword, so it was much easier for him to use. After all, he was a sword cultivator. A true sword cultivator. In the cultivation room, Yang Yi sat cross-legged on the ground while the various techniques of the dual sword technique appeared in his mind. He planned to master it. Left-handed swordsmanship. Yang Yi decided to take it step by step. He wanted to see how strong he was while using his sword in the left hand. A day later, Yang Yi left the cultivation room and went to Arya. He wanted her to be his sparring partner. Arya licked her tonghulu as she stood outside her abode. Your sparring partner? Yang Yi nodded. Arya stretched out her hand. What's in it for me? Yang Ye's face darkened. When did she learn this from Snowy? Arya blinked. Big brother Yang. Being a sparring partner is very tiring, so it's normal to pay for my effort, right? Yang Yi smiled. Arya, what is our relationship? Speaking about compensation is so hurtful. Isn't it? Arya thought for a moment and said, that does make sense, but don't you humans have a saying? Even real brothers should keep clear accounts of everything. I think it makes lots of sense, don't you? Yang Yi shrugged. Go on. Tell me what you want. Her eyes lit up. I want to eat people like you and Big Sister and... Yang Yi glared at her. Are you asking for a beating? She puckered her lips. I want demons too. Like that dragon. Only demons like that are delicious. Yang Yi had quite the headache. What is she? If it's humans, she wants the best. If it's demons, she wants demons like a primal true dragon. Is she crazy? Arya gazed at him with a pitiable expression and waited for his answer. Yang Yi sighed softly and said, Arya, how about I try my best to find you food? However, you must promise not to go outside and run wild. Both you and I are too weak when compared to this world. She thought for a moment and nodded. Just as Yang Yi had said, the world was very dangerous. Especially after they arrived at Desolate City, that feeling of hers grew even stronger. So, she glanced at Yang Yi, and then she suddenly felt that staying in this pagoda was really nice. Because she didn't have to worry about anything. Of course, it would be better if she had a powerful demon to feast on every day. Yang Yi walked over to her, rubbed her head, and said, Don't worry. I have many enemies, so you'll have lots to eat. Arya hesitated for a moment and said, Big brother Yang, can you take me to see my grandfather once we leave the desolate world? I really miss him. Xianxia smiled. Of course. We'll head straight for Eternal Village once we leave this place. I want to see Auntie Veg and Master too. Arya cracked a very wide smile. Xianxia brought Arya to the Ascension platform. It was the best place to fight, because it was extremely strong and could endure powerful strength. Arya clenched her right hand. Big Brother Yang, are you sure that you want me to use my full strength? Xianxia nodded. Of course, don't hold back. Bring it. She hesitated for a moment and said, but I'm afraid that I'll kill you. The corners of Xianxia's mouth twitched. Go on. Use all your strength. You don't have to take responsibility if you really kill me. Arya nodded. She stopped hesitating and strode forward before slamming her fist at Xianxia. It was a very simple punch. Xianxia was very well aware of Arya's strength, so he didn't dare act carelessly. He circulated his profound energy and stabbed his sword forward with his left hand. The sword domain, however, he only used for swings. He didn't dare to use his full strength against Arya as he was afraid of hurting her. But it didn't take long for him to regret that decision. Bang! An explosion resounded and Xianxia was blasted away with his sword. He flew all the way out of the Ascension platform. A wisp of blood seeped out slowly from the corner of Xianxia's mouth, and his entire left hand was trembling. On the Ascension platform, Arya was stunned and hurried over to Xianxia. Big Brother Yang, why are you so weak? I haven't even used my full strength. Xianxia almost spat out a mouthful of blood when he heard this. Xianxia leaped up and went to the Ascension platform. He gazed at Arya and said, Come on, let's continue. Arya was slightly hesitant. Big Brother Yang, maybe we shouldn't. I'll feel guilty if I kill you. I'm serious. Xianxia glared at her. If you don't get over here, then you can dream of ever having a full stomach. As soon as Xianxia finished speaking, she leaped over to Xianxia and slammed her fist at him. Arya's strength was a little special. It was unlike his own physical strength or Huang Zhongyue's physical strength. It was another form of pure strength, and it was very terrifying. This time, Xianxia really didn't dare to hold such immature thoughts as he'd previously had. Injure Arya? He would be lucky to avoid being injured by her. Xianxia didn't go head-on against her fist because Arya's speed was much more inferior than his. When her fist arrived before him, Xianxia suddenly moved sideways and dodged it. At the same time, his sword swept horizontally at her stomach. It was swift like a bolt of lightning. Arya couldn't dodge it at all and was struck by Xianxia's sword. However, Xianxia didn't use the blade of his sword. He'd struck her with the blunt side of it. But just a moment later, he regretted his decision. When the blunt side of Xianxia's sword struck her stomach, Xianxia felt like his sword had struck a super divine treasure. As for Arya, she wasn't even shaken by it. Arya blinked and slammed her knee at Xianxia's stomach. Xianxia's reaction was extremely swift, and he moved around 3m back. But at the same time, a wave of powerful energy slammed down at him. It was Arya. Xianxia's sword descended. 5 swings with the sword domain. This time, Xianxia didn't hold back because he noticed that Arya was much stronger than he'd ever imagined. However, Xianxia was surprised by Arya's actions, because she didn't try to defend herself or dodge his attack, and she just let it strike her head. At the same time, her little fist slammed against Xianxia's stomach. A mouthful of blood sprayed from Xianxia, and then his figure was blasted away. Xianxia stopped around 3 kilometers away. He looked down at the stomach, and it had cracked open. It wasn't just his stomach. His entire body was covered in cracks. Fortunately, he had the primordial violet energy, so they were quickly healed. But that wasn't the main point. The main point was that there were small cracks on the sword precursor's blade. Crack. It was a divine treasure. He'd struck her on the head, but his divine treasure had cracked. Xianxia took a deep breath and walked over to Arya. At this moment, she was touching the horns on her head, and Xianxia's gaze descended upon them. His sword had struck them earlier, and they'd stopped his sword. Xianxia asked, "Can I touch them?" She glanced at him and nodded. Xianxia touched the horns. They were icy cold and quite solid. Besides that, there was nothing special about them. Xianxia asked, What are these? She shook her head. I don't know. They just grew themselves. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. Meanwhile, she added, Big Brother Yang, are we going to continue? Yes. He hurriedly said, Of course we are. So, their fight continued. This time, Yang Yi didn't hold back at all, because he noticed that even if his blade struck her, her body remained completely unharmed. Arya's body was so strong that Yang Yi almost felt despair from it. He knew that perhaps only Executor could break through her defense. He would naturally not use it because his goal was to temper himself. Chop, stab, flick, slash, slice. On the Ascension platform, Yang Yi executed basic sword moves over and over again. Needless to say, fighting Arya really trained his instinct and reaction. So long as he was even the slightest bit careless, he may be punched away by her. So he was exceptionally careful in battle with her. Arya discovered some combat techniques while fighting Yang Yi too. So, she stopped fully utilizing brute strength and she learned to dodge and use technique when fighting. It could be said that both of them were improving tremendously. Just like that, a day passed, 2 days passed, a month passed. A month later, Yang Yi started using 2 swords. Once Yang Yi started using 2 swords, he gradually gained the upper hand against Arya. Yang Ye's dual swords were too quick, so quick that Arya could only defend herself against them. While her body forcefully resisted countless attacks from him, she didn't have the slightest opportunity to fight back. The 2 swords descended upon her like an incessant storm. Even then, Arya wasn't injured at all. Her body was even more terrifying than a divine treasure. However, Yang Yi didn't use his madness intent. Once he did that, his combat strength would multiply. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to control himself, and the slightest mistake may harm Arya. After all, he had another sword. Bang! 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 On the Ascension platform, Arya was being completely suppressed. While she didn't suffer any injury, she felt very aggrieved. Extremely even. As for Yang Yi, he grew fiercer and fiercer as the dual swords felt increasingly easier to use. As Yang Yi swung his swords madly, the blood vessels beneath his skin started to tremble. And as they did, Yang Ye's strength grew increasingly terrifying. Every swing of his sword left a faint mark on Arya. Ah! Suddenly, Arya howled with fury. At this moment, her eyes were crimson red, and she slapped her palms downward. Bang! The world shook. A moment later, the short nails on Arya's hands gradually lengthened, and it didn't take long for them to grow a few dozen centimeters long. Arya leaped forward with rage and pounced at Yang Yi. She clawed down against Yang Ye's sword supreme. Bang! Yang Yi was blasted away, and the sword supreme started cracking as if it would shatter at any moment. However, Arya didn't stop and pounced at Yang Yi again. Yang Ye's expression changed drastically at the sight of this. He didn't dare to continue using the Sword Supreme and Sword Precursor, and he hurriedly withdrew Executor. Hiss! A ray of light flashed. It was Executor. A short while later, Yang Yi was stunned on the spot. Arya had grabbed Executor with her right hand, and she suddenly exerted force on it. Executor started to bend. She plans to break a super divine treasure? Yang Yi was flabbergasted. Favorite.